As if I did not get enough people mad at me the last time I did one of these when I said the Sophie scarf. Never wanted to be involved in the hot takes today. Hi, hello, my name is Allie. I'm an independent graphic designer and writer coming to you from just outside Toronto, and this is my channel where I talk about what I'm knitting, how it's going, and what it's costing me. And today I have some more controversial knitting opinions for you. I kind of thought that I was tapped out on these. I felt that way for a long time, but some sort of recent events in the world of knitting have transpired that have reinvigorated me with some new thoughts. And to be honest with you, my book club cardigan is going very slowly, so a whip update was not in the cards for us today. So instead, I thought let's talk some hot takes. First though, as for my mug and tea of the day, this is my rainy day mug, which is unfortunately very accurate for the type of spring that we are having here in the Toronto area. It is gloomy, it is cold. The only thing that feels like spring is the miracle of life that has moved into my front porch. There is a bird's nest taking place on top of my water meter, and I am delighted by it. So at least we have that. That's about all that I have right now telling me that it's spring. And out of my sad rainy day mug, I am drinking Golden Moon from Keats & Co., which is a sort of like a citrusy, cinnamony black tea, which if you're thinking, that sounds like a fall winter tea, did you listen to anything I just said? That's what it feels like. That's very unfortunately appropriate. So anyway, seasonal or not, it is very good if you're ever interested in trying Keats & Co. tea. Their tea is great, and all of their proceeds go toward the equitable treatment of tuberculosis worldwide because it's, guess what, entirely curable. And why is it not actually cured all around the world successfully? Greed, capitalism, hot takes right out the gate. We're not even out of the tea segment. Anyway, as for what I'm wearing today, this is my Barnsley sweater by Cheryl Mokhtari. This is unfortunately not a size inclusive pattern. See my previous knitting controversial opinions video for why I wouldn't still pick this pattern and knit it today, but I knit this very early in my knitting journey and now I have it, and so I do wear it. And since I finished it in May of 2023, I've worn it 55 times, which is pretty solid. So factoring in our total project cost of $160 Canadian, that puts me at a current cost per wear of $2.90, which feels pretty good and is only working its way down. It is a little bit tighter, I think, now even than when I finished it, which is not ideal because it was always kind of tight on the sleeve side. And I think that also, just as I've gone on to knit more things that have more positive ease, this was before I really had a handle on my gauge and understood that I knit tighter than most pattern designers. Now I have a lot of things that fit with just a little more comfort and ease, and so I'm a little bit more aware of this one. It definitely got more wear earlier on, but it still gets pulled out on days when I'm like quite cold because this is a warm sweater. All right, first controversial opinion. Pattern theft isn't real, asterisk. I am gonna attempt to apply some nuance to the controversial opinions category. That may in itself be unpopular, but this was sort of brought top of mind for me recently around the Sailor Slipper saga and allegations of pattern theft around that. Aspen in the Moment did a video. Aspen does all kinds of fantastic summaries of knitting world drama, but here's the thing. I think that there are kind of two different components to the discussion of pattern theft. There is what is actual copyright law, like what is actually illegal, and then there are ethics. And I think that, you know, as we've attempted to build a society together as humans, we have largely tried to have significant overlap between those two things, that the law should reflect what we consider to be ethical behavior. However, I think we all know there are circumstances that fall outside of that. And I think that pattern theft kind of is walking a funny tightrope in this area. So also to be clear, I'm not a lawyer, especially not a copyright lawyer. I am only telling you what I have come to understand through my own learning about this. Grain of salt, okay? So my understanding on the actual copyright law of pattern theft is that what a garment looks like, a finished product, is not protectable by copyright. The end product, you don't own that, you can't own that, you can't protect that. What can be protected under copyright law is the actual written instructions, or say in the instance of like a video tutorial, the video itself, that is protected under copyright. But the finished product of like a garment at the end is not protectable. I believe in part because clothing falls into this funny like utility category where like at the end of the day, like a sweater is kind of a sweater. And we can, I think, debate like the details of that, of like, well, this is a really particular sweater with really particular characteristics. Is that the same? Like, I can see debate to be had there, but in the world of copyright, it does not care. A sweater is a sweater. All that matters is your exact written or whatever format of instructions for creating it. That is what is protected, like the recipe for creating that thing, as it were. So in legal terms, there really is no such thing as pattern theft unless it has literally been stolen and like copied word for word, pattern to pattern, which I don't think is generally what we're talking about when we're discussing the idea of like, oh, did this designer steal this design from someone else? Which means that we're operating less in the realm of like legal, actual copyright infringement. And now we're operating in the realm of ethics, right? And I think that this is where like it just gets so dubious to try to litigate this because I mean, things happen at the same time. People have the same idea in different places, influenced by either sometimes entirely different circumstances that they happen to arrive at the same thought around the same time, or by people who are experiencing a shared society with shared pop culture and shared influences, and therefore it makes even more sense that they would arrive at the same idea, guided by all of the same influences, right? So I think that it's so usually impossible to discern whether something genuinely did pop up entirely separately, like two people had the same independent idea at the same time. It just happened that they resembled each other a lot, and one hit the market very shortly after the other just because of the way that things fell with the timing, or whether the person who put it out second saw the first one and decided to make their own version. And I think that like this is where it gets really tricky, because what is the line between being influenced by something? Because we're all influenced, right? Like I'm a professional graphic designer. I went to art school, right? There's the famous line, good artists borrow, great artists steal. Like everyone is always building off of everyone else's things. And in part, to me, like that's what's cool about creative pursuits, is that it's all sort of in conversation with one another. We are all taking in things from each other and reacting to things from each other. And we're all pitching in our own little piece into this weird little group project that we're all doing. The group project framing is one that I like a lot. I got this in a video maybe like a year or two ago. One of my favorite YouTubers, Hannah Louise Poston, she does like fashion and beauty content. She was talking about sort of the double-edged sword of trends, and where on the one hand they can be a really negative thing where it's just feeding hyper-consumerism and people are getting things they don't even really like, they just want to be on trend, and then it's in a landfill 6 months later. That sort of trends at their worst, but trends at their best can be a sort of communal group project that we're all doing this sort of performance art together of like we're all sort of interested in this idea of this trend at this moment. And isn't it interesting that the silhouette of all of our jeans has changed in the last 5 years, that we've all sort of taken this dramatic shift broadly in the same direction? And if you think about that, isn't that kind of a cool way in which this massive horde of organisms spread across the globe are doing something all together? Like, isn't that kind of cool when it happens in a broader sense and not at a speed and a specificity of a particular garment that feeds into that real hyper consumerism in the same way? And so I think about influence in pattern design in a similar way, where it makes total sense to me that we would see a design that we really like and want to do our version of that, our iteration on that, in the way that we're always taking in each other's things and iterating on them. Which I guess then the question becomes, well, what does it mean to iterate versus to copy? Like, how much does it need to change to be your own thing versus a copied thing? And I think that's where I just kind of lose interest in trying to pry apart one from the other, because I don't really think that you can. And I think that we just have to leave room for that kind of iteration and collective imagination and progression of styles and art more broadly. And like, I just don't think that you can actually litigate it in any effective way. And I think for the most part, people are just doing their own take on things, and some are going to be more or less similar to things that inspired them. But at the end of the day, like, there are room for variations. I can't even tell you how many times I've gone looking for a pattern to create an idea in my head that to me seems like it should be quite basic. It's like, okay, I want an all stockinette V-neck sweater, but I want it to have kind of like a chunky V ribbing, and I want the neckline to be designed in such a way that it can accommodate the neckline ribbing to be of that depth without it ending up being a really shallow V. And you know, I would like it if it were this kind of shoulder construction. And it's amazing to me how often I can find something that's similar to what I'm looking for, but critically falls short in at least one way. And it's like, man, I would love another almost identical pattern to all of these other ones I found that just isn't quite what I want. So I do think that there is room for multiple patterns that are very similar. The asterisk that I want to throw on this when it does start to feel ethically dubious to me is when it is a particular dynamic of the second person to post a design that bears a striking resemblance, when that second person is a huge name designer. That is when I start to go, because like I said, I believe that there is room for multiple designs that are similar to one another. But I do think that there is a power dynamic at play in a similar way, actually, to trying to parse out things like workplace relationships and whether they're appropriate. And like, I think that there are so many great love stories of people who met at work and it's totally wholesome and lovely and fine. And then there are others that are on this like incremental scale of increasingly questionable. And that increasing questionability usually has something to do with the power dynamic, and often not in a way that is black and white enough to be said, yes, this is fine, or no, it is not in legal terms, but it is this factor that really starts to color how something is looked at. And I think that there's a similar thing going on when there's a huge power differential between designers in question, particularly when the later party to publish is the bigger designer. And I don't mean that in a way where a big designer is deliberately using power over the smaller designer in a way of like personal harm or anything like that. I mean more just in the sense of like, we all know whose pattern is gonna eclipse the other. Like, if a big designer puts out a pattern that's strikingly similar to a small designer that has been, you know, gaining a little bit of traction but is still a small designer, we all know that basically 95% of people are going to be introduced to that idea via that big designer. They're going to knit that big designer's pattern, and the smaller designer is going to lose out despite potentially having started the whole thing, come up with the idea. And I say potentially because, again, we don't know that these ideas weren't arrived at completely independently. It could be completely innocent on the part of the larger designer to have happened to come up with the same idea. I completely hold that that is entirely viable, and in that case, it's just a sticky situation. Like, I don't have a great answer. I think, like, in that kind of situation, no one's at fault, and it just kind of is what it is, and it does stink a little for the smaller designer. But I feel like when it comes to the idea of like iterating and being inspired by things, I think that I do place a larger onus on big designers when you have such a huge platform that is really going to pull a lot of attention away from smaller designers if you publish something similar. I do think there's kind of a responsibility to not be inspired by things, but I think to make sure that you are doing more of a mashup, if anything, like between different ideas that you've seen, or just really making sure to put a significant spin on it when you're doing your own version. I think that I expect a higher level of personalization and making sure that you're making it your own more so than I would from a smaller designer. And like, is that a double standard? 100% it is. However, what did Uncle Ben tell Spider-Man? With great power comes great responsibility. I do kind of think that when you have attained certain levels of success and recognition and influence, I do kind of think that you have to start behaving a little bit differently. And is that fair? Like, I guess that can be debated, but I think that in terms of the impact, like if you just happen to be a human the size of Godzilla, you unfortunately need to step a little bit more carefully than everybody else, because otherwise you will squish people. And like, is it fair? Is it fair that you have to be held to a different standard in the way you walk around? You could certainly argue, no, it's not, but I also think it's not fair for the people who get squished under you if you don't. So that's kind of my hot take on pattern theft. I think it's not real unless you're a big name, and then I think you need to be more careful. That's what I think. Okay, controversial opinion number 2. The idea of like you should read through the whole pattern before you knit it is bullshit. Like, are people doing this? If you do this, please report it, because first of all, I just have doubts that anyone is doing this at all. But second of all, I kind of take fault with the very premise, and maybe this is just a side effect of the particular way that my particular brain works. I have had that thought before. I should really read through this pattern so that I like know where it's going and make sure that I don't run into, you know, the thing you run into sometimes in a recipe and like cooking when, you know, you're going along, you're following all these instructions, everything's going great, and then you get to an instruction that says, meanwhile, you're like paragraphs and paragraphs down, and it's like, while you were doing all of that, you should also have been doing this thing that you're now half an hour behind on. So I understand the concept of like, look through the pattern to make sure there's not anything like that that's gonna cause you a real problem later on. However, whenever I have tried this, I have so quickly hit a wall where like I could read the words and I could understand what they are saying in a literal like, okay, I see the shapes on the page, I compute them in my brain that knows how to read, and it spits out what that word is. Like, I can read it, but it doesn't mean anything because my project is not at that stage. So when it's telling me, like, do this with the that and see where that is and do this there, and I'm like, but what, where, here, there? Like, it doesn't exist. And I, as heavily documented on my channel, extraordinarily bad spatial reasoning. So like my ability to envision that my sweater exists to a certain point, I'm really starting to wonder if I have this sweater on backwards, by the way. Like, is that why this doesn't feel like it's fitting as well as usual? Or is this just that thing where I think my sweater's on backwards and I flip it around and realize it was better the first time? Hang on, we're gonna find out. I'm really not sure. This is by far my worst sweater in terms of being able to figure out which way is the front. And like it did start with short rows. So and every time I study it and I still can't figure it out. So it was obviously not enough short rows. Anyway, this feels at least the same as it did before, so I'm not gonna bother turning it back around. Are you looking at the front or the back? Who knows? Anyway, if I am knitting a sweater and all I have is like a neck yoke and it's telling me about what's happening at the underarm, and then after that when I'm down the sleeve and do this and do that, I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking, and especially when you get into more nuanced things, like if I'm reading ahead and it's talking about short row instructions and it's like slip these and then that and then knit this many and then turn, and then I'm like, is anyone reading through this and actually successfully fully computing and visualizing what it's saying in a way that is giving them meaningful information all the way through a pattern that they have knit none of yet? If so, I am so genuinely impressed by the capabilities of your brain, and I would love to know what it's like to be you. But like, for me, that does nothing. I fully all the time see instructions in a pattern that I'm like, I have no idea what that means. And then I get to the point in the project where it's actually time to follow them, and I read like the whole paragraph, and I read it like, I have no idea what that means. And then I read the very first thing I'm supposed to do, and I'm like, okay, yeah, okay, I see how I do that. And then I read the very next part and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, now that makes sense because of what I just did. And I work through that paragraph direction by direction. And by the end of it, I'm through the whole paragraph and I understood everything and did everything. But trying to read the whole thing in advance made no sense. That's my experience with a paragraph, not infrequently. So I'm like, who is reading the whole pattern at the beginning? And anyway, let me know if that is actually you. If it's not, don't worry, it hasn't bitten me in the butt yet, knock on wood, but I mean, I kind of feel like, and you know what, I kind of wonder if this is advice that is dated more from an era of like single page magazine knitting patterns where they give you so little to go off of, and because they don't get in the weeds in the same way, maybe it does make more sense to read at a higher level, or maybe there's just more potential like gotchas written in those, more like meanwhiles hidden in the second half of them. I would be surprised if a lot of patterns that are being published today independently in the world of like 25-page PDF patterns that walk you through everything and have been through testing and tech editing, like I would be shocked if any of those retained any gotchas in the same way. So the more that I think about it, the more that probably is a holdover from like hastily written and very squashed knitting patterns from magazines and knitting pattern books of the past. That's my best guess, because otherwise it's bull. Controversial opinion number 3. Being a monogamous knitter working on only one project at a time is not morally superior. Like it's odd to me that I even feel like this is a thing that is worth saying, because to me it's so obvious. Like, why would it be better in some like philosophical way to only knit one pattern at a time? But as someone who is a monogamous knitter and is generally broadly only knitting one thing at a time, oh, my necklace is in here since I flipped that around, I am surprised by how often people express things to me like, wow, good for you that you can focus on one project and like get it done. I wish that I were like that. I'm really trying to be more like that. I'm trying to really, and I'm like, why? Like, it really feels like there's this sense that it is truly, like, I don't mean morally superior to be dramatic or to embellish. It really feels like there is this bizarre, is this the Puritans again? It feels like this very puritanical, thou shalt only knit one thing at a time, and that anything outside of that is like some sort of betrayal of your whip that you had started, or like you have given into temptation to kind of like, it feels very biblical in a way that I'm like, guys, we're knitting. Guys, like, it's fun. Like, this is our hobby. We're doing it to enjoy ourselves. I enjoy knitting one thing at a time. Like, I can't knit multiple things at a time. Like, when I try to, it actually means that I have just fully shelved the first thing and now I'm knitting the second thing instead. And then because I tend to be a completionist, I will still go back and finish the first one. But I'm not knitting them concurrently. But I know so many people do. Like, so many people have several whips going on at a time, and they might knit one thing one day and one thing the next, and then go back to the first thing and then knit a third thing on the fourth day. They might even do all of that within one day, just in different parts of the day. And I simply would never do that, because that's just not how my brain, I have no desire to do that. In the same way that I get the impression that the people doing that have no real desire to be knitting the same thing every time they sit down to knit. But it really feels like there's this thing floating around, like, in the ether in a similar way to, like, I think we have a similar cultural idea around, like, being an early riser, being morally superior to being someone who stays up late, which, again, I say as an early riser. Makes no sense. Like, this shouldn't be a thing. If you like knitting multiple things, knit multiple things. Like, I suppose it takes you longer to finish any one given thing from the time that you cast it on. So if your concern is really finishing it as quickly as possible, like, sure, you're not doing that. But at the same time, if you have all of these different things on your needles and you're knitting the same amount that I'm knitting, once you've been in this cycle for a while, like, at first it would take you a long time to get any finished objects, but once you've been in the cycle for a while and you have actually finished things, you will actually be finishing things. You will be experiencing the finishing of a project far more frequently than I am, because you might be 75% through one project and 80% through another and 95% through another, and you know, so like it's just spacing. It's like each one takes longer from start to completion, but also you are completing something much more regularly than I am. And in the end, like, we're knitting all the same stitches. We're just dividing them between different projects, and therefore those things arrive in our closets at slightly different timelines. And that's it. So, like, you're knitting on multiple projects and you're enjoying knitting on those multiple projects. Check. Success. Like, A+ on the hobby. I think that if you like knitting multiple things and you're trying to make yourself stick to one, I think actually that's when you fail the hobby. I think that's actually when you get an F in fun. And not by putting the F in fun. You're taking the F out of fun. You're doing a bad job at the hobby. Do the hobby the way you like to do the hobby. I had a hilarious conversation recently with my sister where she was like, serious question, when you listen to audiobooks, what speed do you listen to them at? And I said, I usually listen at like 1.25 because I need it sped up just enough that it feels like the speed that a person would actually talk at. Because to me, I listen to an audiobook narrator, and as a fast talking person, they sound so slow to me. But I'm not out here putting it at double speed. I'm like, that's so stressful to me. No, thank you. And my sister was like, I just found out that I'm the only person in the whole world who listens to things at single speed. And she was like, and I tried listening to it at even like one point, it was like 1.15 or something. It was a very slight increase. And she was like, and it was just so stressful because I feel like they're yelling at me and I just didn't enjoy it. But I tried to do it because I was like, I can listen to so many more books and that's how we're doing it. And then I think of all the things that I can read and it was just stressful. And then I realized that I don't have to and I can just listen to them the way that I like to listen to them. And I was like, yeah. Like, I changed the speed of my audiobook so that it annoys me less. If you're adjusting the speed of your audiobook and it's annoying you more, again, you're failing the hobby. This is the thing that's supposed to be fun. If you are feeling pressure to alter it in a way that makes it less fun, you're failing the hobby. Okay? I think this is a lesson that we all need to bear in mind. Controversial? God, I hope not. Controversial opinion number 4. And I realize this might perhaps sound a little bit contradictory to the last point, but I am going to draw a line between the two, so stick with me. Hobbies are allowed to be hard sometimes. And I think that to me, the key distinction of when is it like, you're not letting your hobby be fun, what are you doing, let your hobby be fun? The key distinction to me is whether there is a should in the equation. Like in the last point, I was talking about things where you feel like you should be doing your hobby in a different way because of reasons X, Y, or Z, right? It's like other people do it this way. It's better in some amorphous sense of the word to do it this way. That's how I should be doing it. That's how it is done in like a proper sense, okay? When I say hobbies are allowed to be hard, I mean when it's something that you want to do, you are motivated to do it, but it's difficult, or there are parts of it that are difficult. And this is one that has been sort of top of mind for me lately as I've been, again, working on the book club cardigan that is taking so long. This is truly the never-ending cardigan, but I am motivated to do it. I want to do it. There's no sense of I should do this, because by all accounts, I should not do this. Like, I should not have picked a DK weight yarn to knit this worsted weight project out of, making it even more stitches per inch, even more work. I should not be knitting this cable all over thing that is taking forever. And when people hear me talk about the challenge of it, many people have said to me, you should frog that thing. You hate that thing. You're not enjoying working on that thing. You should go work on something else that you like more. You should move on, or you should put that aside and see if you want to come back to it in a while. Should. And I'm like, no, because I like it. It is hard. There are parts of it that are hard. Getting it like picked back up, particularly after I put it down for a while, was hard, but now I am happy. I am working on it. It is slow. That part of it is hard, but the actual knitting of it, I am enjoying the actual knitting of it. When I finish sitting down for several hours and I see how little fabric it added, is there a little bit of, this is why it's been so many weeks and I'm still so far away. And like part of my brain is getting a little bit antsy and excited about the idea of moving on to the next thing that I will knit after this. A little bit like, it doesn't usually take you this long to finish a project. According to my mental clock, like it's time to be on to something else now. How are we still doing this? But it doesn't mean that I'm not still enjoying it when I sit down to knit it and that I'm not still highly motivated to finish it. It just means that sometimes some parts of your hobby are hard. And if that's in service of a part of your hobby that you want to do or that is important to you, that's okay. And on the flip side, it's okay if that's not what you want out of your hobby, right? I touched on this a little bit in my last, I think, discussion of the book club cardigan, but the idea of type 1 and type 2 fun, the more like instant gratification, wonderful in the moment, great the whole time kind of fun, versus things that are fun once you have done them and like the reward and having like gone through the challenge and completed it. And I think it's perfectly reasonable for people to want their hobby to be type 1 fun. So again, we're going back to the should, we're going back to like, well, I should only knit one thing at a time. Like, no. If you like knitting multiple things at a time, if you like knitting things that are very like simple and that you can breeze through and that you're not running up against challenges that you have to troubleshoot that might get you frustrated, if that's what you want your hobby to be, if that's what is fun for you, do it. Do the thing that is fun. For me, it is fun to have some of that sometimes, and also to try things that are hard sometimes to work toward like a really enticing end product that I'm building skills to be able to do. And that to me is a sort of type 2 fun that is also blended with type 1 fun. Because again, when I'm sitting there knitting, I am enjoying it. The type 2 comes more when I'm looking at, how did I spend so many hours knitting this week and I still have so much left to go? Like, how did I produce so little fabric in that time? That's where the type 2 fun kicks in. But I think that sometimes there can be a misunderstanding between people who operate in a type 1 fun from their hobbies kind of world and people who operate in sometimes a type 2 fun for their hobbies kind of world, where like, it is so okay that you in the type 1 category are looking at this project thinking that this sounds like your personal hell and that you want nothing to do with it. That's fantastic. Great. Don't knit it. And I'm so happy for you to knit whatever you want to be knitting. I think there can just be this struggle to imagine that it might feel different for somebody else. So like your hobbies are allowed to be hard sometimes. And if you are having fun being challenged and sometimes being frustrated and sometimes it looks like you're not having fun, but then afterward you are having fun and you're pleased that you did it, that's okay. I think that a lot of personal growth can come from being challenged in things that we elect to be challenged by and not just the things that life forces us to be challenged by. I think that it can be nice to pick your own challenges once in a while, and I think that hobbies are a great place that you can do that if that's what you want from your hobby. If you are exhausted, if life is challenging you plenty in every other respect and you need something that is not challenging in that way right now, fantastic. That's what the easy projects are for. Amazing. You should not be doing anything. It is a hobby. There is no should. There's only what you want to do. Okay, unpopular opinion number 5. Lightbulb stitch markers are so underrated. This is so much more like concrete and low stakes perhaps than the last one, but do I really not have one of these handy? I want to go get it, but the dogs are so peaceful right now and I don't want to get them all riled and think that I'm done filming because they'll be excited. But I will pop up a picture. Editing me will hate me for not just getting up and getting one. But Lightbulb stitch markers. I somehow went through 2 or 3 years of knitting before I caved and bought these. And these are truly, like, if I at some point ever do a video that's like things that I shouldn't have bought when I started knitting and things I wish I bought when I first started knitting, these are absolutely top of the list for things that I wish that I'd had on day 1. And, you know, it's kind of unfortunate that I didn't knit any Sorry Nordland patterns sooner because I started knitting hers shortly after I bought my Lightbulb stitch markers. And her patterns very frequently tell you to use a locking stitch marker to mark something that you could not mark with a regular like circular stitch marker. So I would have been forced to do it a lot sooner if I had been knitting her patterns. But I kind of, because I hadn't run into anything like that yet, I was just sort of like, well, my round ones are working perfectly fine and they're so cute. I have these cute little cocoa knit ones. They're so nice. And the Lightbulb stitch markers are just kind of ugly by comparison. Like, you can get them in cute colors, but they're just kind of like an awkward shape and they just always feel like, you know, something that was attaching the tag to like the shirt that I bought at a boutique or something. It just feels like a weird little scrap that's being like repurposed and is just kind of like ugly. They are like the greatest knitting tool invented since the knitting needle, I swear. I use them for so many things. They are so much more multifunctional than I realized that they were when I got them. I literally wrote a list of things that I use them for. Let's look at this, okay? So thing number 1 on my list, unfortunately, they are ugly. That's not a thing I use them for. That's just apparently a thing I wanted to make sure that I said. I use them to change the needles on my interchangeable set. They fit perfectly in the little keyhole in your interchangeable needles, so I don't have to fish out the key that comes with interchangeable needles. I don't have to figure out where that is or try to keep it handy because there's always stitch markers handy somewhere. And usually I can easily find one of them and use it to change out my needles. And I have been so much less grumpy about having to change out my needle tips since realizing I could do it with the Lightbulb stitch markers. You can use them as stitch stoppers in the same way because they fit through that hole. If you put it through that hole and then close it, you have a stitch stopper on your needles now. Your stitches cannot go anywhere. You don't need separate stitch stoppers. Magic. Especially, like, I almost never use stitch stoppers, so for me it's very handy to have an option if in like a particular scenario I'm really worried about it. It's something that I can do and not have to go find my like one set of stitch stoppers that I have somewhere. I also find them so helpful as like interim stitch markers. So there are often cases in a pattern where usually I would be using just one of my round stitch stoppers, but something has happened where either, you know, I was following instructions and it told me to put in a marker and just by the time I got there, I forgot. So it allows me to go back and put in by using a light bulb one, because it doesn't have to be the current live stitch, so that I can slip on a circle, I can open it up and I can get it in there so that next time I knit around to it, I can swap it out from the circle one. Or more frequently, what ends up happening is that at some point I realize, oh, I must have dropped a stitch marker at some point. I used to have one here to mark my end around and now it's gone. I obviously like paused knitting when I was there and like dropped it in such a way that it fell off and I didn't notice and I kept knitting, and it gives me the chance to, again, not have to wait until I get back at that point in my knitting and remember at that point to put it back in. I can just put in a light bulb stitch marker, and then when I get to it next time, I know to put in the new one. I also use them to mark if there's some sort of problem that I've noticed, and again, I'm not at the right place to do something about it right now. So say I realize, oh no, I forgot to do my decrease and now I'm already half a round away. I don't want to pick all the way back. I will just mark that with a light bulb stitch marker so that when I get back around to it, there's something there physically reminding me you need to do something here, and then I will do my decrease there just on the next round. I've also used them when knitting sleeves 2 at a time, sort of as a like ferry, as a way to get stitches from the front needle to the back needle or vice versa when they're at the juncture that it's not at the ends of the needles, like where the needle tips will never fully free it because they're like caught in the middle between the two. If you've never knit sleeves 2 at a time, this probably won't make sense to you, but just trust that there is a place in this setup where if you at some point realize, oh no, it would actually be better if I like shifted the last stitch here to be the first stitch here, that it's hard to do that because there's no point where you can just like pull it through on magic loop and like it'll now be on the other needle. So I have used it sort of in the same way of a cable needle to just hold it off of the needle that it started on, so that when I eventually get back around to the other half of that sleeve on the other needle, now I can pick it up using that other needle. And on that note, the other day I actually used a light bulb stitch marker as an emergency cable needle. I brought my book club cardigan with me for a train ride and realized I forgot to bring my cable needle. And I was like, oh no. Oh no. And I hate cabling without a cable needle. I don't like it. I'm very bad at it. And also I know that it can affect your cables. So even if I could, like, I wouldn't want to switch to doing that because then it might look different from my other cables. And I was like, what am I gonna do? Like, how I don't, at home, if I had, say, lost my cable needle, I would just use a different tip for my interchangeable set and use that as a cable needle. I don't have any of my other needles here. I just have my whip and the needles and what are attached to those needles. And guess what was attached to that whip on those needles? There was a light bulb stitch marker stuck somewhere that it didn't really need to be anymore. So I took it off and I used it as a cable needle. I slipped the stitches that I would slip onto a cable needle onto the light bulb stitch marker, and I closed it so that I could safely knit the stitches I needed to knit, open it up, slip them back on the needle, knit them, cable twist went off perfectly. And I was like, huh. New use case for my light bulb stitch markers unlocked. It's not, I don't like recommend it. Like, it's definitely more fiddly because I did find I had to like close and open it to keep them like securely on there. But it totally worked in a pinch, and it was like, if it is this or not being able to knit on this whole train ride, I absolutely will do this. So that was a fun bonus. They're just so multifunctional, and I feel like I did not grasp that for far too long in my knitting process. I just really didn't see much point in them, and now that I have them, I find new points to them constantly. Underrated. Controversial opinion number 6. AI is a scourge, and it's coming for knitting. I'm so... Ugh, it's bleak. So, first of all, I would like to acknowledge off the bat the areas in which I think AI does hold some important promise in areas of like accessibility, translation, especially in accessibility context. So I don't want to deny the huge leaps and bounds that have been made already and will continue to be made in those respects. I'm thinking about, for example, people accessing medical help and being able to actually communicate with healthcare providers. Like, that's so important and that's so critical, and its ability to improve is being powered by such powerful technology. But that powerful technology is simply not technology with a level of power that I trust the tech oligarchy with whatsoever. Like, what else inevitably comes with that is just so scary to me. Like, we're really trusting this in the hands of people from companies whose mottos are things like move fast and break things. Oh, I wish so badly that it was possible to have these very particular use cases where AI, I think, can do some really important things without that opening the Pandora's box. But just like, it's like in pulling that one out, we inherently pull out everything else. It, for me, it has real, like, but at what cost vibes. Like, yes, it is capable of so much that could be so wonderful, but at what cost? Because also, I might feel differently about it if, I mean, if we had a much less resource intensive way of doing it, or if it was just limited in who and how it could be used so that those resources were being used wisely. But also, if we lived in a society where I trusted that people would be taken care of when their jobs were replaced, that the elimination of labor by AI would actually result in people living more comfortable lives of more leisure with more time to do less labor and more of what they want to. That sounds wonderful. Instead, the AI is making the paintings and writing the stories and doing all of the fun, generative, creative work that is fulfilling and interesting and meaningful to humans, and we are just at home still doing all of the menial chores and also wondering how rent is going to be paid if our career is wiped out. So I just don't like super feel like that's going really great. But also, to tie this into knitting, this is a knitting podcast, I feel like I have started to see interesting new ways that it's making its way into knitting that feel bleak to me. I feel like for a while now we've been seeing kind of the early wave of this with generative AI. You know, we've been seeing just like pictures of sweaters that if you look at them closely, the construction actually makes no sense and the stitch pattern doesn't really line up, and like, oh, that doesn't actually make sense. Oh, it turns out that's an AI generated image of a person wearing a sweater that doesn't exist. Take it a bridge further and you have AI generated knitting patterns that make absolutely no sense if you try to actually knit them. I will say, actually, I should amend my pattern theft category. Did discuss how it's the writing of the pattern itself that's what's protected. If AI is being used to rewrite an existing pattern in just slightly different words I would say that is pattern theft in a way that I do not condone and will not excuse under any circumstances. To me, that idea all comes down to like human creativity and the way I was talking, waxing poetic about us influencing one another, and isn't that the beauty of humanity and whatever, and there's no humanity in AI, so it doesn't count. Anyway, this video is a really dangerous excuse for me to go on a lot of rants, but to tie this back to knitting more specifically, I was contacted recently by a brand that was like, hey, we have a knitting app that, you know, we would love to sponsor you to talk about on your channel. And I was like, oh my God, I get emails fairly regularly for things that I in no world want to promote on this channel. Things that have nothing to do with the channel, nothing to do with me. My favorite one that I got last week was, Hi, Allie Makes Everything. We have been watching your work for some time and we love so much how you try out different AI technologies and investigate how they can be used in your workflow and share that with your audience. But like I'm out here being an AI tech bro on the channel. I'm like, what are you even talking about? This is obviously an AI written and poorly targeted mass email. So to get something that was actually like, hey, this is an app for knitting, and it sounded like sort of like a row counting whatever, I was like, great, I'm always down to try a new row counting app. I don't feel like I have settled on one that I feel like entirely happy with. Great, that sounds totally up my alley. And so I downloaded it to try out, and oh, the way my heart sank when I realized that this felt like a project where some venture capitalist was like, so how can we bring AI to knitting? What could we do with that in like a row counting app for knitters? And essentially the app has some like basic row counting app features, but sort of the crux of it, the heart of the app, their big selling feature is you import your patterns from Ravelry or wherever, great, wonderful. And then our app uses AI to basically rewrite that pattern into a checklist where you can easily check off each step as you go, and you're only looking at the instruction that's like relevant to you next. So like, don't lose your spot in your pattern, know exactly where you are, know exactly what you're doing next. To which I say, so you want me to take a pattern that was written by a human carefully, edited carefully by that same human, reviewed by a tech editor for any potential errors, and then tested by countless other knitters who actually produced from this exact series of words on this PDF that I purchased the garment that was intended to be produced from that pattern. Reported any issues, the pattern was updated to reflect that. This pattern has gone through so many steps to eliminate errors, and you are offering me, for the gain of functionally a check mark, to introduce potential for countless new errors, completely unchecked, through this AI rewriting process. Why? Like, I think anyone who has ever actually encountered an error in a knitting pattern and had to go back and fix something because of it knows how frustrating it is to have to undo your knitting, undo potentially hours of work, and go back and redo it. And fortunately, that experience is rare because, again, see above about all the steps that patterns usually go through to prevent that kind of thing. And so the idea of just opening myself wide up to so many times more potential errors just for the sake of being able to like check something off, as if it doesn't accomplish functionally the same thing to just like use the little highlighter line in the app that I use to review pattern. Like, do I think that there's room for improvement in the apps that we use to track our progress through knitting patterns? Absolutely. I think I could imagine many updates to tools that would make that easier, that involve no AI. This might be shocking to you. Can you tell I'm sort of anti-AI? But like, I could even imagine versions that incorporated AI that I would find less objectionable. Just things like using AI to identify where check marks could be placed alongside the pattern and graying out everything but one paragraph at a time, and as you check one off, it ungrays out the next paragraph and now you're focused on that one. Like, that even would make more sense to me as a use of AI, but it just felt like such a classic example of that expression of like, to a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. It just feels like we're in such this weird AI bubble where it's just like, it's not what is the problem and how could we solve it? It is, what is something we can throw AI at? What is a problem we can invent that we can then pretend AI is a solution for? And that is what this app felt like to me, which was very disappointing to me to discover, because I was excited about the idea of a new sponsor who was genuinely a good fit for the channel. They don't come along super often. So I was like, fantastic. This seems so great. I'm so genuinely excited to check this out. And then I did, and I was like, oh no. So it's coming for knitting. I'm really looking forward to, like, AI is absolutely not going anywhere. Because it is here, I genuinely hope that we do get the full potential of it in the use cases that I was talking about before, where I think it could genuinely do like important and life-changing things for the better. I just hope that we at least arrive in an era soon where, like, if it's gonna be here, it's at least being concentrated on things that actually make sense for, and not this weird thing where every single thing in the world is a nail to the hammer that is AI. Because like, as someone who uses a lot of software in my job, I cannot tell you how much time I spend in a day clicking X's on all the different apps that I use, constantly trying to pop up AI like help for me in places that I do not need it and do not want it. And even if there are ways to turn that off in the settings, which there probably are, but there are so, like, truly so many of them in so many different parts of so many apps that I think that it would take me days to find them all in the settings and turn them all off, because it's just everywhere. And I just feel like I'm batting away mosquitoes constantly. So that's my little AI tirade. Let's move on.
Editing alley. I meant to mention and truly thought that I did, but then editing this back, I'm like, where is this part? I wanted to mention that Two Women Yelling About Knitting did a video discussing all about AI in the world of knitting, and they got into way more different stuff in way more detail. And they also have sort of a range between them and how they feel about using AI as a tool. So if you're interested in more on this topic, highly recommend going and checking out their videos.
Okay, that's all the controversial opinions that I have for you today. Hopefully I don't regret this too much. I would love to know, what are your controversial opinions, or do you just want to fight me about mine? You can do that too. Also, just want to give you a heads up that the Patreon book club is about to start its first ever month discussion. So we are reading Crying in H Mart this month. We've been reading it throughout the month, but we are about to start the actual spoiled in-depth discussions in the chat. So if you're a fast reader, or maybe have just already read the book and want to join in, there is still time for you to do that and be involved in the first round of the book club. And if not, there is still a week left to vote in the poll for the next month's book club if you want to join next month. The Patreon is pay what you want, so all the different tiers get all the same perks. And so in addition to the book club, I send you a cute little postcard in the mail to say thank you. We have a chat about our knitting stuff. We have our book chat, of course, and it also includes early access to my videos. So if you're interested in joining, would love obviously to have you. Absolutely no pressure. This will continue to be free the way that it always has. And thank you so much for coming to knit with me today. If you'd like to be here next time, I hope you'll consider subscribing if you haven't already. But if you already have, you're my favorite, and I'll see you next time.